And I want to get into our big story for tonight. Our big story is very much along the same lines. It's about Columbia University. And first, we'll talk about how Columbia is losing its federal funding. This was a decision made by the Trump administration. Last week, it was announced that the Trump administration was reviewing $50 million in federal money that goes to Columbia. This weekend, the administration announced through the Department of Education that they are revoking $400 million in federal money from Columbia. The only reason they're revoking the money is because of pro-Palestine protests that took place on the campus. And this is a story from the New York Times. It says, quote, the Trump administration's abrupt withdrawal of $400 million in federal funding from Columbia cast a pall over at least 9 other campuses worried they could be next. The schools, a mix that includes both public universities and Ivy League institutions, have been placed on an official administration list of schools that the Department of Justice said may have failed to protect Jewish students and faculty. This week, the president threatened in a social media post to punish any school that permits illegal protests. Illegal protests. On January 30th, his 10th day in office, he signed an executive order on combating anti-Semitism, focusing on what he called anti-Jewish racism at leftist universities. Then, on February 3rd, he announced the creation of a multi-agency task force to carry out the mandate. The task force appeared to move into action quickly after a pro-Palestine protest at Barnard College, a partner school to Columbia, on February 26th. 2 days later, the administration released its list of 10 schools under scrutiny, including Columbia, which was the site of large pro-Palestine encampments last year. It said it would be paying the schools a visit, part of a review process to consider whether remedial action is warranted. Then on Friday announced it would be canceling millions in grants and contracts with Columbia. So they're sending out minders. We call them minders. You know, like mind your own business. Do you mind? Minders, spies, hallmongers. The administration has created a task force to send out fucking spies to Columbia, Harvard. They're going to these campuses posing as students or faculty, and they are literally there like Randall in Recess, the cartoon with the checkboard. You know, they're there with their clipboard and their pen. Anti-Semitic. I hear an anti-Semitic trope. I overheard a Palestinian student criticizing Israel, and then they report back to the government. This is a government task force. They report back to the federal government in Washington, and then they revoke money that the school needs to force the administration to change their policies so that the schools police anti-Semitism. So you are not allowed to criticize Jews on an American campus anymore. That's just outside the question. If you are between the ages of 18 and 30 and you're pursuing a undergraduate or postgraduate degree, or if you're faculty, you cannot criticize Jews or Israel on a college campus because you never know who might overhear that and report it to the federal government of the United States, because this is how it happens, and they will revoke $500 million in money from the school. This is what they describe. This is what they're doing. The article goes on. It says Harvard University, whose former president resigned last year following an appearance before a House committee, is also on the list. So are George Washington University, Johns Hopkins, New York University, Northwestern, UCLA, UC Berkeley, University of Minnesota, and the University of Southern California. Many campuses had already cracked down on students over protest activity. More are dialing back or renaming efforts related to diversity, an effort to avoid the ire of Trump officials who have vowed to end such programs. In a statement on Saturday, Harvard said it was committed to ensuring our Jewish community is embraced, respected, and can thrive at Harvard, and to our efforts to confront anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred. Richard Painter, a professor of law at Minnesota, was among those who filed a complaint about anti-Semitism at the university. He had chafed at incidents on campus, including anti-Israeli statements posted by faculty on official department websites. This is how it happens. So the faculty is on some website criticizing Israel. A Jewish professor files a report with who? Who even knows? With the DOJ? With the ADL, with the task force, who even knows? Maybe they just call their cousin. Maybe they just call their uncle, who is running BlackRock, who is running the New York Stock Exchange, who's running Hollywood, called them up and said, I saw an anti-Semitic post on the faculty website, boom, on a list that the federal government maintains of schools that are going to lose money. But the professor, Mr. Painter, a former White House ethics lawyer during the George W. Bush administration, wondered if the school was targeted because it sits in the congressional district of Ilhan Omar. On Friday, Columbia said it was reviewing the administration's announcement and that it pledged to work with the government. Also on Friday, Linda McMahon, the newly installed Secretary of Education, met with Columbia's interim president. She issued a statement saying the schools must comply with federal anti-discrimination laws to receive federal funding. So the first thing I want to talk about is this. Eventually, Trump supporters and conservatives have to confront this contradiction. You cannot claim to be against woke, against DEI, against hate speech laws, in favor of free speech, in favor of the First Amendment, while you are punishing schools because of so-called anti-Semitic speech. It doesn't work that way. J.D. Vance can go to Europe and wag his finger about Europe's democratic deficit or how they're not a pro-free speech civilization anymore, when his own government is punishing schools because the faculty or the students are expressing criticism of a foreign state, or even for that matter of a people. I would add, anti-Semitism, however you define it, is protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution in the same way that criticism of black people as well as dislike of black people is protected by the First Amendment. So is criticism of Jewish people and dislike of Jewish people. And, you know, we like to say on the show, I mean, I don't harbor hatred and I'm not anti-Semitic, be that as it may, whether you do or you don't, it's all protected by the First Amendment. It's all considered protected by a free speech regime. You can't have it both ways. What's more, I thought that this administration was dismantling wokeism. I thought this administration was dismantling affirmative action and DEI. But now you have the Department of Education saying all schools must comply with federal anti-discrimination laws. I thought, according to Richard Hanania and other writers, I thought that anti-discrimination laws were the foundation of wokeism. I thought they were the foundation of anti-white policies. That was the problem. That's what they've said. They say that it all came from the civil rights era. It all came from these anti-discrimination civil rights laws, affirmative action laws. And so on the one hand, the Trump administration will say, we are dismantling woke, DEI, we're dismantling the Civil Rights Act, we're dismantling the various hiring policies. At the same time, their Department of Education says if you don't comply with it as it pertains to Jewish people, you're going to lose all your money. We're going to destroy your university. So the first takeaway is this is a glaring and blatant contradiction. And by the way, it is only explained by the fact that the conservative movement is controlled by Jews. That's it. How else could you explain it? The conservative movement has no problem saying that fewer black people should go to Harvard. The administration has no problem dismantling affirmative action when it comes to blacks, Hispanics, and women. The administration has no problem blaming helicopters crashing into planes on DEI, on diversity programs. They have no problem, by the way, with how those various groups feel. When the administration ratchets up the rhetoric on Haitians or on Hispanics or on women or on black people because of these various policies, when it comes to immigration or abortion or the other one, when it comes to these different policies, they say, well, that's just tough. If Haitians feel bad because of how we're talking about eating cats, that's too bad. If Hispanics feel bad because of what we're doing with immigration, well, that's too bad. If Muslims don't like, if they feel badly about how we're talking about Muslims, that's just a shame. But when it comes to Jewish people, we're going to enforce the Civil Rights Act to the letter. But when it comes to Jewish people being made uncomfortable, we're going to send hall monitors to the university to report back whether Jewish people feel uncomfortable. And if they do, there will be hell to pay. We're pulling back all your federal funding. How else do you explain this dynamic other than that Jews have a privileged position inside the conservative movement? How else do you explain it? We don't cater to anybody else's feelings. We don't even cater to white people's feelings. We don't cater to any other minority group. We don't cater to the majority group. We don't talk about white voters. We don't talk about white unemployment. And when blacks, Hispanics, Muslims, and Haitians don't like how they're being talked about, we say, well, that's just too bad. But when it comes to Jews, well, we are going to enforce the laws. And we're going to enforce the laws even if they just feel uncomfortable. We're going to enforce the civil rights laws we apparently don't like. We are worried about the percentage of Jews enrolled at Columbia, and it needs to be more. It needs to be adequate. And if we see that they're disincentivized from going because of protests, well, the protests are illegal. We'll force the protesters to take their masks off so that we can dox them and penalize them so they won't go out in the first place. We'll take the money from the schools so the schools do it for us. And they say that I'm obsessed. That's the gaslighting. If you point out the double standard which betrays the fundamental dynamic, because it's not enough to say if the shoe were on the other foot. It's not enough to say if the shoe were on the other foot and it was Chinese spies, if the shoe were on the other foot and Jeffrey Epstein was Chinese, if the shoe were on the other foot and these were protests about immigration rather than anti-Semitism or Palestine. It's not enough to say there's a double standard. You must say, why is there a double standard? You must say, why is it that there's a preference? Why is it that there's a privileged position? And the reason is obvious. Obviously, they receive the privilege because they have the power. They're doing the enforcing. When you're doing the enforcing, you can be preferential. Now, when someone like myself talks about the double standard and how it betrays the true dynamic of the conservative movement, it is the conservative movement that turns around and gaslights and says, you're just obsessed with Israel. Why don't you talk about anybody else? Why don't you talk about this? What about this? What about that? You're a hater. You only ask questions about Israel and no other country. That's because this is clearly the group that's getting the privilege. This is the group that's getting the preference. And we support free speech. We support free speech when you criticize blacks and their behavior. We support free speech when you criticize Jews and their behavior. We have supported free speech that criticizes whites for decades. For decades, whites have been made uncomfortable. For decades, whites have been the butt of the joke from Hollywood, from the media. For decades, whites have been told, we don't care about your tears. We don't care about Elvis. We don't care about your culture, your ancestors. If you feel dispossessed in your country, well, good. That's how we feel. For generations, no one gave a shit about us. There was no question whether that was hate speech. No question whether Columbia should lose money over that. When Harvard had a class taught by Ta-Nehisi Coates or whoever, when Harvard and Yale and all these liberal schools had BLM departments, basically anti-white departments, there was never some uproar over that. When they promote anti-white books, anti-white immigration policies, anti-white rhetoric, in some cases genocidal rhetoric, there was never any effort like that. As far as I'm aware, there's still no effort underway, even under the Trump administration. But there is when it comes for Jewish people. And they say all the time, well, the problem isn't the Israelis. The problem isn't the Jewish fifth column in the United States. They say the problem is the left. The left has the real power. And I've said this before. If the federal government of the United States is creating a task force to punish the most elite universities that graduate anybody that might have an anti-Semitic attitude, wouldn't you say that the Israelis are more powerful than the woke? Wouldn't you say that that's equally a problem, or it is similarly a problem? They say all the time, why do you focus on the Israelis? These guys are on our side. Are they? Because if I was at Columbia University, they would be reporting me to the federal government to be investigated by the DOJ or the DHS, and they would use that also as a basis to go after the school, to go after me, because I'm an America First patriot. If they caught one of you, I don't care how pro-Trump you are, if they found a Daniel Schmidt, a John Doyle, these cocksuckers that love Israel so much, that are making excuses all the time for Israel, if they caught one of those guys, if they caught Daniel Schmidt at University of Chicago being anti-Israel, they would come after his school for him being there. And they would say the school is going to lose their federal money unless the school does something about his speech. If he formed up a group, invited a speaker, a protest on the quad on the campus, they would be coming after a school, holding the school's money hostage until the school cracked down on him, found a reason to get him out of the school, found a reason to dissolve his club or target his activism or whatever. And the same with Doyle. If he went to college, it'd be the same story. And so I hear all the time from pro-Israel conservatives and their apologists and the janitors that sweep it up after them. They always say, well, you've got the right and the left. That's the dynamic. And the right wing has its Jews who happen to be pro-Israel, and the left wing has their Jews and they're anti-white Soros guys. And, that's just how it is. And we got to line up with the pro-Israel guys. Well, you see the fruits of this. You vote for Trump and say, Trump got money from Israel. That's really not a big deal. Who really cares? That's just how it goes. It's a token concession that he'll give to them. They're basically on our side. It's not a big deal. If you oppose that, it's spiritually leftist. The left is a real problem. And now this Trump administration that was obviously installed by Israel is gunning for anybody that is anti-Semitic, gunning for anybody that criticizes Israel, no matter how hard you voted for Trump. That's at Columbia. So they took $400 million from Columbia, not because they're anti-white, not because they're left-wing, not because they're liberal, but because they're not protecting Jewish students from the peaceful protests. And Trump is moving to make the protests illegal. Now, there's another dimension to this as well, specifically about the protests. So how did we get here? Well, Columbia became a hotspot for protests after October 7th. Students at Columbia took over the campus. They shut it down with their encampments. And this is, you could argue, maybe where the biggest anti-Israel protests or anti-war protests occurred. And this was the subject of a massive effort to shut down the protests. There was a leak that Eric Prince and Tucker Carlson were in a group chat called the Off Leash group chat that included billionaires, that included the New York police chief, that included people in the New York mayor's office. It was over 100 people, billionaires, financiers, politicians, members of the police, people from Israel, Israeli spies, defense contractors. And the group chat was dedicated to the question of how they would break apart the protests on the campus. And there were handshake agreements between some of the New York billionaires, the police, the mayor's office, and the school to break down and stop the protests. You had members of Congress visiting, high-level members of Congress visiting to supervise and make sure the encampments were disassembled and destroyed. The president of Columbia was called before a hearing led by Republicans, led by Elise Stefanik, and questioned about anti-Semitism. It eventually ended in her being removed as the president and the chairman of the board of Columbia, I believe, or maybe that was UPenn, stepping down as well. But it led to the faculty at Harvard, Columbia, and UPenn all stepping down. And I said throughout the year that Columbia and the American campus became another front in the war in Gaza. Gaza is where Israel is staging its invasion, but Israel's also fighting in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Syria, and Iraq, in Iran, and here as well. Israel's fighting here by getting TikTok banned. Israel is fighting here, getting Elon to ban people for saying from the river to the sea. Israel is fighting here when they get their allies in Congress to call a hearing and question the presidents of the universities. It's happening here when they target the protests on the universities. And by the way, when they intervene in the election, and Miriam Adelson gives $100 million to Trump, and AIPAC puts $100 million against any candidate that votes against foreign aid to Israel and unseats politicians like Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman. This is another front in the war in Gaza. And now that they got the intended result, which is Trump installed as president with the Republican House and Senate, now they're using the Department of Justice. Now they're using the Department of Education. They're even using the Department of Health and Human Services to go after so-called anti-Semites and critics of Israel. Why do you think they're doing this? There's a reason they're doing this. And it's very simple. For Israel to conduct its war in Gaza, it needs American money and weapons. For Israel to fight its war against Hezbollah, it needs American money and weapons. For Israel to deter aggression or retaliation from Iran, it needs military support from the United States. For Israel to deter even its allies from attacking it, like Egypt or Jordan, it needs the United States to pay them off. And now that the war in Gaza is about to kick off again, now that the ceasefire is collapsing, Israel has invaded Syria. It is refusing to withdraw from Lebanon. Now that Hezbollah and the Houthis have promised the war is coming back when Israel invades Gaza once again. And by the way, now that Israel is preparing airstrikes against Iran, they must clear the way so that the United States can back Israel's attack without any opposition from the United States. So what is in effect happening is that we're getting some form of martial law. We are getting some form of martial law in the United States, like a wartime censorship. We're getting wartime suspension of civil liberties, because if we're able to protest on a college campus, if we're able to organize, if we're able to spread messaging on social media, then this might undermine America's war guarantee to Israel. Because if there were popular dissatisfaction with the plan to liquidate Gaza, with the war in Iran, with the United States getting involved, then maybe there would be some pullback. Maybe there would be some restraint. So that is, in a nutshell, what is happening. To put it very succinctly, Israel is forcing the Trump administration to impose martial law and restrict our liberties so that there will be no opposition to America's involvement in Israel's wars. It is simply stated, that's it. Because throughout the last year, it was these protests on the campus and the protests in the cities and the narratives being pushed on TikTok and X, which was driving popular opposition, which translated to electoral results. In Michigan's Democratic primary, you had 100,000 people voting no preference as a protest vote because of Biden's support for the war in Gaza. And ostensibly, as long as that was going on, America's guarantee to Israel was in jeopardy. And so now that they have installed Trump, Trump is going to make sure that that does not happen. So the protests will be deemed illegal. TikTok will remain banned until or unless they censor all of the pro-Palestine hashtags. That is what is happening. And again, you can't be America first. You can't be pro-America. You can't be in favor of free speech and the First Amendment if you support that. And people like to say all the time, you know, well, what about these other issues? What about this? What about that? You know, look, even Palmer Luckey, who replied to me on Twitter, Palmer Luckey, who runs Anduril is part of the Little Tech takeover with Thiel and the PayPal mafia. Palmer Luckey said, I'm a radical Zionist. And I said, how could you say that? That's just not loyal to America. An Israeli would never say they're a radical American. And Israel has attacked our country. And he says, well, you know, Republicans have betrayed our country too. And I can be America first while also being pro-Israel. And I said, yeah, I mean, maybe in a vacuum that would be the case. Maybe in a vacuum, all things being equal, you could say, I think Israel should or could exist, but I also love America. I said, but it ignores that they control our country. It ignores the influence they have, and they make America do things contrary to its own interest and the interest of its people. So no, you actually can't. In reality, in theory, but not in reality. He didn't reply after that, but that is why you can't ignore the issue. So anyway, so that's what's happening at Columbia, but I want to go further. I want to go deeper on this. There's another story about Columbia, and that is that the Trump administration is deporting a former Columbia student for organizing one of the protests. And this is again from the New York Times. It says, quote, the Trump administration invoked an obscure legal statute over the weekend in an attempt to deport a Columbia University graduate and lawful permanent resident of the United States who helped lead campus protests against Israel last year. Mahmoud Khalil, age 30, who graduated in December from Columbia with a master's degree from its School of International and Public Affairs, was arrested by immigration officers in New York on Saturday and sent to a detention center in Louisiana. So he's effectively in prison. Mr. Khalil, who has Palestinian heritage, holds a green card and is married to an American citizen who is 8 months pregnant. So this is not an illegal alien. This is not a felon. He has no ties to Hamas, as far as we know, no ties to a foreign militant or terrorist group. We don't know what he's accused of, what he said, what he's done. His wife is an American citizen, and yet he is being deported. President Trump said Mr. Khalil's case was the first arrest of many to come. He said on social media, we know there are more students at Columbia and other universities across the country who have engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity. Nice of him to throw America a bone, right? Oh, okay, good. So not only is it anti-Jewish and anti-Israel, it's also anti-American. And the Trump administration will not tolerate it. If you support terrorism, including the slaughtering of innocent men, women, and children, Oh, like what Israel is doing? Your presence is contrary to our national and foreign policy interests, and you are not welcome here. We expect every one of America's colleges and universities to comply. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also reposted a Homeland Security statement that accused Khalil of having led activities aligned to Hamas. He led activities aligned to Hamas. But officials have not accused him of having contact with the group, taking direction from it, or providing material support to it. Rather, the rationale is that the anti-Israel protests that he helped lead were anti-Semitic and fostered a hostile environment for Jewish students at Columbia. Oh, so do they need a safe space? So when blue-haired white women, when trannies and gays, when blacks, when Hispanics, when Muslims, when they protest and they say, get this hate speech off my campus, and they're blowing whistles and banging drums and yelling outside of a speech, when they do that, the conservative response is, hey, man, triggered, need a safe space, facts don't care about your feelings. When Jewish students are saying, I don't feel comfortable, get this anti-Semitism off our campus, this is like Hamas, this is like October 7th and the Holocaust put together, then the federal government swoops in and deports everybody involved. We will not tolerate you making them feel uncomfortable. It's an occupied country. Do you understand this? Do you understand how that changes everything? This is an occupied nation. Not, oh, there's a little Israeli influence. Not, oh, well, maybe there's something going on with the Jews. No, this is an occupied country. We live under an occupation. We live under an occupation. This government is not of, by, and for Americans. It's not of, by, and for rich Americans, coastal Americans, elite Americans. It is of, by, and for Israel. It is of, by, and for the Jewish fifth column, which occupies our country. That's what it is. How else could you describe this? When white people get upset, fuck you, get over it. When non-white people get upset, get over it. When women and men get upset, get over it. When Muslims and Christians get upset, get over it. When Jews get upset, call the National Guard, get Homeland Security and the FBI while you're at it, get the DOJ and the military, get RFK in it as well. Because anti-Semitism is a disease. Get the Secretary of Health and Human Services too. What else do you call it? The article goes on, it talks about Columbia. On Friday, the administration announced it was canceling $400 million in grants and contracts with Columbia, citing the school's continued inaction in the face of persistent harassment of Jewish students. Amy Belcher, the director of immigrants' rights litigation at the New York Civil Liberties Union, said she could not recall any previous instances in which a Secretary of State invoked that provision, the Immigration and Nationality Act, the INA, since it was enacted in 1952. And once again, there's a contradiction. So what is happening right now with illegal immigration? The administration said mass deportations, but they've made it clear they're only targeting criminal illegals. So they said they would deport millions and millions of people, anyone that was here illegally. Now they're saying we're only deporting violent criminals, people that have been convicted or charged or sentenced in any sort of crime, and the deportations have ground down to a halt. At the same time, the administration says, we want people to come here. We want people with degrees to get green cards. We want to take their diplomas and staple a green card to it and give them permanent residency. This is a permanent resident that received a green card through a school visa. He's married to a U.S. citizen, eligible for a green card under that as well. So he's at once not an illegal, not a violent criminal, which should mean he's immune from deportation. He's a legal immigrant who went through school, which means we actually want him. And yet he's being deported. Unlike the many illegal immigrants, and he's not receiving the green card like many of the students that the Trump administration wants to dole out. He's being imprisoned and deported, again, also not because he criticized, or rather not because he supports Hamas materially or coordinates with them, but because he criticized Israel. So once again, you have another contradiction. We're deporting all these criminals, but not the good, hard-working, tax-paying ones. We want people to come here. But if you criticize Israel, whether you have a green card or not, whether you're illegal or not, we're deporting you. Once again, contradictions, false promises. We're going to not intervene when schools are a hotbed of anti-whiteism, but we will when they are for anti-Semitism. We don't care if every group is offended, but we do if Jews are offended. We're not deporting any of the people that are here, pulling resources, sending their kids to school, using the emergency room as healthcare. We will deport you, even if you have a green card, because you criticize Israel. Priorities, folks. And what do the priorities tell you? So first, there's that. But then you also have the same free speech issue. What did this person do other than coordinate protests? They're not telling us. They're not accusing him of supporting Hamas with money or weapons. If he was, they'd probably say that. It is strictly because he exercised his First Amendment right to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, which is why he is currently being detained and expelled from our country. And the question is, can American citizens be deported? Could I be deported for criticizing Israel? Is anybody, who's game here? Who's up for grabs? Can any citizen, any green card holder, any resident, who all can be deported? Now, if you're an American criticizing Israel, you forfeited your right to citizenship. And what standard does that create? Is the standard now that to become a citizen or a resident of the United States, that you have to pass the test, you have to have a job, you have to meet all the requirements, but also you have to support Israel? That's now the basis of U.S. citizenship. You cannot live on the land unless you support Israel vocally or tacitly. Anyone that criticizes Israel now forfeits their right to citizenship. How is that free speech? How is that the First Amendment? How is that even patriotic? How is that even American? How do you think, for all they talk about, for all that Trump waxes at the end of his speeches about how they sailed the ocean and they tamed the wilderness, and for all that Vivek talks about the founding fathers, what do you think George Washington would say if you got in a time machine and told him that people would be removed from our land because they criticized a foreign country? How do you think that George Washington, who led the army against Britain because they were occupying the United States, because they were occupying the colonies, how do you think that he would feel if you told him that people were, I mean, he wouldn't be happy that we had Muslims here to begin with, probably. But how do you think he would feel if you told them that citizens or residents were losing their place here because they criticized a foreign country? It's un-American. And it would be one thing if everybody was being sent home and you could say, well, everybody, all the illegals are going. All the illegals and all the green card holders are going. But they're telling us we're not deporting people and we want people to come on green cards. The only people we really care about getting rid of are the ones who criticize Israel. So you have people saying this was supposed to be a smart play, that if we back the Israelis, they're gonna use this as an argument to do mass deportations. But it's not happening. It didn't happen in Germany with the CDU. It's not happening here. It's disgraceful. You have to call this out. And if you don't understand how this is a problem, you just don't have your head on straight altogether. It's honestly terrifying. On some level, this is becoming a police state occupied by Israel, and especially with artificial intelligence, with surveillance, the data collection. If you are an American criticizing a foreign country, you're not safe anymore. If you're an American criticizing Israel, you might be overheard at your workplace, at your school, and reported to the Department of Justice of the United States of America. And the Justice Department, with that report, compiling some sort of survey or determination about your place of work, your business, about you as a person, your university, they may swoop in and punish you using this Leviathan federal government for criticizing Israel. If you're a green card holder, if you're a resident, maybe even if you're a U.S. citizen, they will use the Attorney General, they will use the Justice Department to fabricate crimes, like they're doing with Andrew Tate. And by the way, that's the same story as well. Andrew Tate flies here to Florida and the Jewish Attorney General says, we're opening up a criminal case. We're going to find something to charge him with. This is the United States of America. You can't criticize Israel. You can't criticize Jews without the Justice Department coming down on you, without the Attorney General investigating you, without the Department of Education taking away the funds from your university. We're going to have, it's almost like a reverse Red Scare. It's like a reverse. In the old days, people were afraid of being a communist. Now it's like you're afraid of criticizing Israel because some Jew is going to overhear you and report you to the Israel-controlled White House, and they're going to punish your whole institution or deport you or try and find a criminal case against you. That's not America anymore. And I told you this would happen. Some people said that the Trump administration would be better for free speech. They said the Trump administration, for all its potential faults, it's going to be good on free speech, and anything to the contrary is overblown. I think Keith Wood said that. Yeah, they were wrong. You were wrong. They were wrong. Anyone that said that looks like an idiot right now. That's not true. It was obviously not true. They were telegraphing it the entire time. They said it in the platform of the Republican Party. Trump personally edited the platform of the GOP before the RNC. It included like 17 points. It wasn't long. It's not a lot of reading. And one of them was they would punish universities that have these protests. They've been telegraphing it for a year. And that's because the whole Trump campaign was installed by pro-Israel Jewish donors. Why do you think it is that after October 7th, all of a sudden, Bill Ackman, who's a lifelong Democrat, and Jacob Hellberg, a lifelong Democrat, and Sean McGuire, a lifelong Democrat, all Jewish tech billionaires, and all their allies flipped from Democrat to Republican? Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because they had an epiphany and saw the light and saw the golden age potential? Or is it because a group text went out? Because they went to Shabbat and they said, hey, we're all backing Trump now, right? Because we got to deal with this Palestinian and Iran thing. That's obviously what happened. And that is why Bill Ackman and his henchmen and his people at the Manhattan Institute led the charge against those universities. That is why their Republican allies in Congress hauled them before a hearing. That is why they put these record sums of money behind Trump. That's why the media was more favorable to Trump than ever. The media actually went against Biden the day that Biden criticized Israel's conduct in the war. It was the same press conference when he responded to the special counsel's report, the inspector general's report, about his potential misuse of classified records. All of those forces, yes, they did actually conspire to install Trump in office so that Trump would support Israel's wars in the Middle East. That much is obvious. It was obvious then, just as it is plain now. And people said, no, it's not going to be a big deal. They're going to be pro-free speech. And I said, obviously not the case, at least as it pertains to one issue, the only issue that really matters. In the Heritage Foundation, they talked about Project Esther. They criticized TikTok and backed the banning of TikTok in the United States because of Israel critical hashtags. And they brought it back with Israeli censorship. And that's in addition to what happened at Columbia and the rest of it. And they say this administration was going to be pro-free speech. Give me a break. They said this administration would be anti-war. No new wars. I mean, how naive can you be? How naive can you be at a certain point? We all know the relevant facts. So how naive can you really be? Are you that naive? Is it possible? Or is there something else going on? Some people are really stupid. Some people have no sense. And some people knew better or should have known better. And I saw a lot of pro-Trump shilling, and now we got fucking 10,000 pounds of shit. That's our government. What did I say? I said, vote Kamala. Or I didn't say, I shouldn't say, I said, don't vote for Trump. I said, maybe Kamala would be better. I never said vote Kamala. I said, don't vote for Trump. I said, maybe Kamala getting in might be better. I'm ambivalent about the outcome. But I said, let's see Kamala get in. I said, she will inherit the recession. She will inherit all these problems. She will inherit the war in Gaza. Let her own it and let Trump go out with his legacy intact. And all those things we projected onto Trump, those illusions or delusions, we could hold on to those. And the TikTok edits, we might be wistful, but at least something would be preserved. Instead of Trump getting in and punishing anti-Semites and going to war in Israel and tanking the economy with him at the helm. I mean, I said that would be the worst case scenario. And here we are. No mass deportations, no wall, recession imminent, stock market and crypto tanking, war with Iran imminent, censorship and lawfare against critics of Israel. It's everything I predicted and then some. I warned you. I tried to tell you, but everybody said I was a Democratic plant. They said I was a Democrat plant. I was a Qatari plant. They said that I'm part of the FBI and I'm here to divide up the right. I'm here to work against Trump. Like anyone fucking cares. Dude, big tech was behind Trump, you fucking idiot. People said, oh, the FBI wants Nick to sink Trump's campaign. Which elites are against Trump anymore? Please remind me. Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, the richest people in the world, contributed to Trump's campaign. Timothy Mellon gave him $200 million, and the Israel lobby put in hundreds of millions of dollars. So Jamie Dimon is saying positive things about Trump. The Secretary of the Treasury was from George Soros's office. So who exactly is against Trump now? They say, oh, it's the deep state, the elites. I'm sorry. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook, they're all pro-Trump now. But yeah, what I'm here from the deep state to convince the good Zionist people of America not to go for Trump. Give me a fucking break. So, so really it's your fault. It's your fault. You were stupid. Not the people that didn't vote, but the people that voted, it's on you. The people that voted, this is your fault. The people that voted for this crap, you fucking dumb idiots, this is your fault. You did this. I told you what was going to happen. And you either didn't know better, you either didn't know well enough to see this coming or to trust me and had any faith in me, or listen to the arguments, because I was making the same argument a year ago that I am today. Or you were tricked by these people. You said, oh, it's not a big deal. But this is your fault. You bought into it. You bought into the hype. And now this is what you get. Now this is what we all get. We got the anti-Semitism police. No mass deportations. We're getting Indian immigration. We're going back in the Middle East. Thanks, guys. Well done. And then, when the recession hits, man, God help us, because we're sitting on a real estate bubble. And Trump's only got 3 years. How long do you think it takes to recover from a recession? If this is going to be a big stinking recession, like it seems like it might be, and who knows? I mean, maybe it won't be. But if it's looking like the big stinking recession that it might be, we're not getting out of this by 2028. It's over. It's over. Golden age begins now. But there might be a little hiccup. But there might be a little discomfort. There might be some disruptions. Golden age. Golden age. We did Trump in a landslide. It's going to be great. Oh, here's your recession. Yeah, just put the recession in the bag, please. Just put the stop losses in the bag, please. Yeah. So anyway, so that's that. That's your, this is our country now. This is our Jewish occupied country. What a joke. What a sick joke. And all it took for you dumbasses was for them to say they were pro-Trump. Oh, all the Jews are pro-Trump. I guess they're based. No, if they support Trump, it means Trump isn't. You fucking retard. If all the Jews go to Trump's side, that doesn't mean that the Jews became based. It means Trump became gay. Obviously, but so many of you really thought the reverse. You fucking dumb idiot. People said, Bill Ackman supports Trump? All right, another guy on the MAGA movement, another red-pilled Pepe, another centipede. This centipede has two curved hollow fangs. Because these people just aren't, fundamentally, these people are just not red-pilled. And at the end of the day, they just never understood. They vaguely are aware there's something up with Israel, but they don't have any clue. They have no clue. And now their ignorance, now we pay the price for their ignorance. The only hope is that it could save J.D. Vance, that it could sink, I should say, J.D. Vance. Our only hope is that this administration is a catastrophe. I'm rooting for it. Our only hope is that this administration is as bad as possible and that it takes J.D. Vance with it. I really hope this administration is just like a fiery, flaming fucking shit explosion crash out, and I hope it fucking drags J.D. Vance straight to hell with it. That's our only hope at this point, is that The administration is just like the rocket that blew up. It's just like flaming wreckage hurtling towards the earth. And there's some like wire, there's some chain, that gets pulled and it wraps around JD and it fucking drags him and his wife to hell with it. That's the only hope. Metaphorically, of course. That's the only hope, is that it cinematically destroys his political career. That's all we could do. That's all we can hope for. And then we get something else in 2028. Short of that, it's over. We're cooked for another 20 years or something. So anyway, so that's that. It's not, guys, this is not good. They're coming after me next. They're coming after Tate. We're a month and a half in and they're deporting people for criticizing Israel. What do you think they're going to do to Candace Owens and Tate and me? Well, Candace Owens is still on YouTube. She'll be fine. She's a survivor. She'll take care of herself. I'm the one that's going to be the idiot that's going to get destroyed. Hopefully not. Knock on wood, but, not good. But anyway, so that's the story about Colombia and this student. There's your free speech. There's your First Amendment. There's your golden age of deporting anybody that criticizes a foreign country. And I hate to say it, but I told you so. Should have known better. And now this is where we are. And it's March. It's March 2025. We got 3-4 more years of this. And like I said, it's just the beginning.